He and his family he's been in touch with, I've met him in Gaza probably 10 years ago when I visited there when I was the director of the Mennonite Central Committee, and have kept in touch with him since then. He has a wife and 3 children. He's moved at least 18 different times in the last 2 years, each time to evade death from the bombings. And I explained that I was here because of a project that was done 30 years earlier to try to save other people from a previous genocide, and that we were now gathering today to commemorate that. And he was thankful that I was here, and he's hopeful that others will be able to save him from the genocide that's happening today. And I have always assured him that my family and my friends were doing everything that we could. We're praying and we're working to try to end that genocide and to enable him to live a dignified life like any human being should have. I'm sorry.
No, don't be sorry.
Well, I gave a pretty good introduction to the Bosnian Student Project last night. Maybe I'll tell a few stories. To me, it was an amazing example of, thank you.
Thank you, sweetie.
Of the antithesis of genocide is love and compassion. And essentially, we were faced with a genocide, and we asked the people to respond in the antithesis to genocide, which was love and compassion. This was a project that should not have been able to happen when you think about it. Bringing 160 teenagers out of a war zone, bringing them into American families in the middle of a war should not have been possible. And it was really made possible only because of the amazing network of people that came together. Primarily Tosin Bayrak and his mosque, but also the World University Service, the network of friends and allies in Sarajevo and all over Bosnia, helping people to get out and get over here. I had the wonderful privilege of having 2 Bosnian students, Samir and Dado, live in my home, and my family will never be the same. It's interesting, you know, the stereotypes is that, you know, it would be incredibly difficult for us to have someone, a Muslim from a socialist country, to come and live in our home. This should have been impossible. Now, before we got our 2 Bosnian students, we also took in a Salvadorian student, about the same age, from a Christian country, Western country. One would have thought, you know, that would have been a piece of cake. And our Salvadorian refugee that came to live with us had a 6th grade education, and we tried to get him into the high school in Nyack where we were living. He was very embarrassed because he was like 17 or 18, and we had to, I think we tried to get him into like the 7th grade or something like that. And it was it was very hard. You know, he's much older, and he very quickly dropped out of school and wanted to take a job. he also came from a very patriarchal society, and he moved into our home, and he kind of assumed that my wife Bobby would be doing everything for him, as his mother always did for him before, and that he would have no responsibilities around the house because he was male. Well, my wife Bobby made quite clear that isn't quite how we run things in our family. Everybody participates and no one is privileged. And when we brought in to our socialist Muslim students, we discovered that they had also come from a society that was not totally patriarchal. It was patriarchal, but not much worse than the United States. They were willing to participate in everything. They did not expect to be catered to because they were male. They knew our music and our art, and actually they integrated into our family seamlessly. It was amazing. All of the stereotypes that we have about religion and culture are not true. People are people, and the Bosnian Student Project was successful because you had a very good educational system in Bosnia, in Yugoslavia. This could not have happened. I remember I got some static in the Fellowship of Reconciliation that we were doing the Bosnian Student Project instead of the Rwanda Student Project, because Rwanda was also having a genocide at that time. But of course, the educational system in Rwanda would not have allowed us to take students from Rwanda and place them into academic institutions in the United States and have them successful. And we did know that our project had to be successful. We could not bring students who could not survive. We did bring students who should not have been able to survive. At one point, there was the student project was being run just about the time Americans were discovering in the psychological thing, the issue of post-traumatic stress disorder. Finally, after the Vietnam War, the psychiatrists were finally coming to terms with the fact that if people are under incredible stress, it affects them in a very profound way. And so this new era of PTSD and research into that had just come to the fore. And there was a professor at Yale who was studying PTSD. And he asked me if he could do a survey of the Bosnian Student Project. And I thought for a while, and I said, well, it will have to be voluntary. The students will have to agree, and not everybody will do it. And I said, I will do it under one condition, that after you do the project, that you will then meet with our students and help to heal them. And he was an excellent academician, and he did the survey. Somewhere in the archives is some of the material from that at least. And he was absolutely amazed. There were like 5 things any which will send somebody into PTSD, losing your home, losing a close relative, not having enough to eat, being dislocated from your village, I don't remember, whatever. But of the 5 things, almost all of the students who filled out the survey had like 3 or 4, any which would have sent them into PTSD. So they should not have been able to survive in American schools. And one of the regrets that I have is that we did not have psychological counseling as a part of our program. I mean, it was such a new field. Actually, in Philadelphia, the project that was run by the professor from Michael Sells project. He ran into a psychiatrist or social worker who did did really serve the kids that were in the Philadelphia area in his program. And I went to one of those retreats that they did and took one of the recent students who had just arrived in the Nyack area down with me to Philadelphia to go to this conference. It was an amazing conference, so I will never forget it. It was a weekend conference at some Quaker center down there. And, you know, lots of food, lots of coffee, lots of music, socializing. But there were also small discussion groups, and there were films. And in the evening, they had a recent film that they had just discovered from Mostar. And they, after supper, the organizer said, we're gonna show a movie recently from Hostetter. It's very heavy. It's frontline footage. Any of you who want to go are free to go. Any of you who just want to stay and drink coffee and eat in the room, that's also fine. So we went in and they showed this video, very graphic, shot on the front lines. And suddenly, in the middle of the video, one of our students got up and said, "Oh, that's the block I live on. Oh, that's my uncle's house. Oh, that's where so-and-so lives, or used to live." And she narrated the rest of the video. So at the end of the movie, the organizer said, "Well, any of you who would like to leave should leave, and any of you who would like to stay and talk about it, stay." So about half the people who had visited, who had seen the movie, left, and the other half, I don't remember, maybe only a half dozen people stayed. And it was amazing sharing, because people then started telling their own stories. Students who I'd known the entire time had never told me their story, what actually happened to them personally, including the student who had ridden down with me in the car from Nyack. And it was just an amazing experience, because people can share their stories when they know that the people that they're sharing it with can understand and are part of that community. It was an amazing experience for me. But I felt badly that we didn't have that kind of psychological support in many of the areas where students went. We as an organization, I mean, I tried to get this professor to, and actually following up on the professor who did the excellent survey of our students, he was a very good academician. And we had a Bosnian student project retreat. So I invited him to come and speak to the students. And unfortunately, he was a fabulous academician and a horrible interpersonal psychologist. So it actually was disaster. I mean, he did not really effectively link. Not everybody who is a good academician and researcher is good as a social worker or counselor in doing it. So that was a failure. I tried to get social workers and people in the Nyack area unsuccessfully to treat our students. And in some of the areas where we were, they actually did a good job and actually brought local people who were helpful. But one of my regrets is that we had not planned and thought about dealing with the psychological trauma of these people. The fact that you all survived and thrived is an amazing acknowledgement of the strength of of the students who came through our project. I remember after Srebrenica, Tosin went to Bosnia or Croatia, and I don't remember which, and he actually invited me to go along. My wife vetoed that trip because the war was still on, and she did not want me going there. But he went, and one of the goals of that trip was to interview students who had survived Srebrenica and bring them back to our program. And so Tosin went, and this was in the middle of the war, but he met with a lot of the survivors and all that. And he came back, and he had quite a few students that he had recommended, and I looked through the list, and none of them were from Srebrenica. And I said, well, Tosin, this was the whole goal of your trip, was to bring students from Srebrenica to our program, and I know you met with them. Why don't we have any? And he said, these people have been so traumatized, there is no way that they could make it in an American university at this point. They need years of counseling and social work and whatever. So he knew, and we knew, that that we could not bring people who were so traumatized that they could barely talk. He said, these people can't even talk. There are several students that we learned afterwards were much more heavily traumatized than what we realized when we brought them. Probably, if we had known how traumatized they had been, we would have said, you know, you can't possibly survive in the US. But they did, and it's amazing. So a couple other stories. So Dado and Samir were in our house, and Samir was, Samir Kalinovich's, his story was pretty interesting. Excuse me. He was one of the brightest students in the at the University of Zagreb in the engineering department. And because he was so bright, his professors at the University of Zagreb protected him for the first year of the war. And when he got into the second year of the war, they just said, we can no longer protect you. I mean, the prejudice against Muslims and Bosnian students in the university area, but we can't do it anymore. So I remember getting a fax or an email from Vesna, who was the World University Service person, and saying, you know, we've got the best engineering student from the University of Zagreb, and he's in real danger. You have to find a scholarship for him. So I said, send me his resume and stuff. His second language was Russian. So he literally had no English background. So I knew that there was a Quaker in the admissions office in Cornell, and Quakers are usually really good, sensitive people. And I said, so I called him up and I sent him the resume, and I said, you know, this guy is in real danger. He's very bright. Could you get him into Cornell? And he looked at his resume and said, you know, you're supposed to have, I don't remember what level of TOEFL. He doesn't even have, I mean, he couldn't get the lowest level of TOEFL. And he said, there's no way that I can get him into Cornell University. But he said, I'll tell you a secret most people don't know, is head of departments in a university can get really bright students into their department, bypassing the usual admissions process. And he said, do you know anybody in the engineering department at Cornell? So I called Bryna Fireside, who was working there, and I said, do you have any good contacts in engineering in Cornell? And she, Wales will tell me who it was, I forget his name.
Zillman Warhouse.
Yes, an amazing, I think it was in aerospace engineering or something like this. But anyway, so he said, send me his transcripts of his grades, and, you know, top of his class. And he said, I want to see his projects, you know, the actual, so I had him scan a few projects that he was doing in engineering, and I said, yeah, we'll take it. And I said, you know, he doesn't have any English. His second language is Russian. And he says, most of the engineering department at Cornell can't speak English. So it's no problem, we use numbers. So actually, Samir came, I think, in like March or April, and lived in my home and volunteered in the FOR, and learned English from that March or April until September when he was enrolled. And he survived as an engineer and got a master's from Cornell University in engineering. Now he was actually in a PhD program, full scholarship. And he would have gone on to be a PhD, except for, you know, he was in the middle of the war. His entire family was in Bihać. His brother was one of the 2 surviving doctors, I think, in Bihać during the war. They were completely surrounded, being shelled all the time. And he would stay up and listen to BBC to where the front line was coming. And he knew that if they overtook the hospital in which his brother was working, that he would be the first person to be killed, because they really wanted to get rid of all of the elites, especially. And the night before his exam on cement structures or whatever, the Serbs had gotten within 60 yards of the hospital in which his brother was working. So he was up all night, and he called me the next day and he said, I failed my exam on concrete. That's severe. That was one of your easier projects. And he said, well, I was up all night, hoping that the Serbs wouldn't take over the hospital in which my brother was. So the professor who was sponsoring him was able to get him out of the PhD program into a master's program, and he was able to graduate with a master's, and he's now in Paris working for the European Development Bank, doing rebuilding of houses in the Balkans. So one other story. One of the families, so Samir used to walk our dog. We had a wonderful dog, and they really bonded. So he would walk Maxie down to a local coffee shop that had an outdoor patio, and he would have his coffee in Nyack with Maxie as his accompaniment every day. And one day, he said, well, I know my way around Nyack pretty well. I think I will just do this myself, and I will leave Maxie behind. Well, so he went, had a wonderful coffee by himself, and while he was down there, Maxie realized that she had been left behind. She went up and chewed up his cigarettes out of his room. So he never did that again. So there are many other stories that would come out, but I think maybe we just go to questions and answers. Anything you want to know that I might know? There's a lot of stuff I don't know. The project was really decentralized. We coordinated with the World University Service, but once students arrived, many students Some of them came through NIAC, and I met personally, but there are students who went directly to their universities and were picked up by local organizers who I've never met. So it's, and amazing things happen in all of those places. So it was a decentralized project that should not have ever been able to happen, but did. It's one of these modern day miracles. But anyhow, open for questions.